I'd like to welcome you guys to this week's report. It's been a pretty good week of fishing here in Southern California, but we do have a lot of wind coming in the next few days and over the weekend and into next week. Today is Thursday afternoon. It's already a little bit windy. That pattern should hold up throughout the next 5 or 6 days at least, I would guess, unless something changes dramatically. I was watching the Channel 5 news this morning, and Henry DiCarlo was explaining it as a onshore flow caused by some kind of warming inland out in the desert. So it's kind of an unusual pattern for us at this time of year where it's just windy the whole time this close to the beach, but hopefully it passes and we can get back to some normal fishing. I'd advise against skips trying to run to the islands this weekend unless the weather changes dramatically. It may not be super windy, but like we found last week, when the wind blows for a few days out there, those conditions kind of double up. So it might only be blowing 10 or 11 knots, but if it's blowing 10 or 11 knots for 48 hours, it's going to be pretty rough once you get out past Catalina or any of the offshore grounds or anything like that. So just keep that in mind, private boaters. If you're going to fish, I'd stay on the coast this weekend, or maybe just stay home and wait for the weather to improve. But let's head out to the map. All right, starting up the Channel Islands, they had some pretty good fishing the last couple of weeks here, and a lot of big fish, especially sea bass and halibut. They're also getting some really big yellows at times as well. The Endeavor had a 71.6 pound sea bass the other day, which is pretty giant, and the Island Fox had a almost 49 pound halibut. Both those were caught on flukes. I think they were on those sudden impact flukes. Those guys are all fishing up there, but really shows you, you know, all those big fish are coming on those baits, and makes you wonder if you get to fish those down here as well and have the same results. But I'm not much of a sea bass or halibut fisherman, but if you guys are thinking about it, why not take one on your next trip? Sounds like there's a lot of sea bass still up there. Sean Stewart on the Great Light got a couple the other day, but said it's more show than go. They're marking the fish, they're just not really biting, which is pretty normal for sea bass when it's not a full moon or a new moon. So hopefully as we get into the full moon, those things will kind of rebound up there and start biting, and hopefully the weather calms down up there because it's going to be windy. Right now it looks like, you know, Rosa and the West Santa Cruz and a lot of the weather Santa Cruz is probably going to be even tough for sport boats, but you know, you could probably fish the east end backside of Cruz down through Anacapa, probably be fishable. It'll probably be miserable this weekend, but it'll be at least fishable for the sport boats, I would imagine. Interesting news up there, some of the boats were fishing rock cod out at Santa Rosa after finishing up on fishing for sea bass and stuff on the beach, and they ran into some bluefin tuna out there in the rockfish grounds, which is pretty cool. I think between two boats they had 5 fish, but that's a good sign. Those fish are scattered around everywhere. So basically, you know, not to talk too much offshore right here, but there's basically bluefin tuna from Ensenada to Santa Rosa Island right now. So if you're on a nicer day, you're a private boater going to one of the islands, make sure and bring something you can cast tuna, cast to a tuna that you might see on the surface, and also bring a gaff and make sure that you have a way to get that on the boat if you do stumble onto one. Heading down to Clemente, they had good fishing earlier this week. The Thunderbird and a few other boats have been out there pretty regularly. I know there was a ton of boats there the other day, but they all had good fishing on the front side. A lot of yellows biting. I think they're real big yellows on the backside that they're getting. I know the Thunderbird had a bunch of big ones the other day, and then there's fish biting on the front, which is more of a mixed grade, but they're still good quality fish. They're not the little guys like a cat, but that's going to be really affected by the wind this weekend as well. I saw yesterday Thunderbird posted, or the day before, a little video of them catching a bunch of yellowtail, hanging a bunch of yellowtail on the front side, and it looked like really fun fishing. But then I posted another video today saying that they had 375 feet of scope out. They anchored 14 fathoms of water, and the wind was howling down the front of that island. So yeah, I'm not saying that you can't go to Clemente on a sport boat and fish this weekend, but I will say that I wouldn't be doing it. So, you know, it's just something to keep in mind. Once this weather straightens out, there's fish to be caught at all the islands. I know that Nick and Santa Barbara, Clemente, Catalina, all those different spots have things happening. I don't think this wind's going to really turn things off. I think the water's stabilized enough that it's not going to be a lights out kind of thing like it would have been earlier in the season. But I know the Apollo was on a 2-day trip, and they had halibut, sea bass, yellows, a little bit of everything. I'm sure they hit quite a few different places during that time, but it's just a good sign. There's a lot of stuff going on. You know, there's still a lot of squid around the islands. I saw the seiners going out on a Tuesday when I fished, and I know that the weather permitting, the Pacific Carnage is usually selling squid in front of Avalon, and if they don't, then they'll usually have it at Nacho's Receiver in Long Beach. But you know, if you're a private boater heading out or got a yacht this weekend, you know, getting that live squid is going to make a big difference on how your fishing day is going to go. But the fish are biting sardines and stuff like that as well for the guys using that. I know that the Blackfish has been running full day trips. I think they're fishing cat for the most part. 6-pack trips out of Davies Locker there, and they've been just wrecking them over there. You know, yellows, bass, bonito, a little bit of everything. Just looks like good summertime fishing there. So once this weather lays down, or you know, check the weather this weekend, cat might be in play, maybe at least the front side if it doesn't blow too hard. But I'm going to be keeping a close eye, and I might try and venture out there Saturday morning or Sunday morning if the weather permits. But if not, I'm just going to stay on the coast, I think. Speaking of the coast, you know, I said I fished Tuesday. I also fished last Thursday after making my report. And I got to tell you that we got up there and the conditions looked great, but the fishing was horrible. I don't even caught 6 or 7 fish in 3 hours of fishing. It was just really odd day, really weird. Everything looked right, but the bass were just absolutely MIA. But we went back up there on Tuesday, and boy, we made up for it in spades. We got up to, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this, you know, with the wind and stuff, you know. So it was forecast to be blowing in Long Beach Harbor and out in front of Long Beach, you know, about 12 to 15 knots, and it certainly was when we got out there at about 2 o'clock. But also, I used the Windy app, and there's a couple of different Windy apps. There's a red one and a blue one, and they're both called Windy. But the blue one actually has wind stations that give you a real-time report, or at least within a half an hour. So I knew that while it was windy in Long Beach Harbor, the wind mills off of Rocky Point were only registering, you know, 3 or 4 knots of wind. So we were willing to, you know, tough it out and run past that rough water down by Long Beach, and knew that if we got up to Rocky Point, it'd be nice. We made a couple stops short just to see if we'd catch anything. I think I got a bass on my first cast on a little MC slug, and Matt caught one a few casts later. But then conditions were uphill. It didn't look right. Water was warm but really dirty. It's just, you know, if you go somewhere and you don't catch anything, and then everywhere you drive it looks exactly the same, it's time to make some kind of change. So I said, well, we've been out here for 45 minutes. We can either go home or we can run up to Rocky. And the run up there wasn't great because that uphill current made it pretty choppy. But we got up there around the corner. It took us a while to find some biting fish, but once we dialed in the depth they were in and the type of kelp that they were on, it was pretty much a no-brainer. You could just pull up to what you're looking at and cast and catch fish. And you know, I've got a little video here showing an example of that. When I say pulling up and catching fish right away, this is a video where we actually just had determined what we were looking for, saw it, and then stopped the boat. Matt made a few casts.
Big one? That was a big bite right there. Not as giant as I thought, but it's all right.
Still a nice one.
Yeah.
Choked it, man.
Yeah. Kicker says, "What's in your gullet?" This is it right here.
Yeah. So what led up to that catch there was the fact that once we got up to Rocky Point area, we found current that was running parallel to the beach, and there was some surface kelp in tight. There was some kelp that was laid down a little bit outside of that, 5 or 6 feet below the surface, and then out past that, there was a little bit less kelp, but a little bit less current, so you'd have stringers, sparse stringers, that were coming to the surface, but with that same current running parallel to the beach. And so I get the question a lot is, how do you figure this stuff out, especially at PB, because it can be pretty tricky. Is you look. So we started out fishing shallow in areas where we caught fish in previous weeks. We had a couple of bites, I think caught 1 or 2 fish, but it wasn't happening. So after hitting 2 or 3 spots like that, the 2 or 3 what I consider the alpha spots, the best looking parts of the kelp, the leading edge, maybe a little saddle that comes off the edge on the outside, stuff like that, we kind of determined that that's not really happening. So rather than just continuing on for 2 miles on that and not catching anything, we went out a little deeper and we fished the kelp that was submerged down below the surface. And because that's not a great place to throw a weedless swim bait or that little slug, because the kelp's down 5 or 6 feet. Matt decided to pick up this AFTCO swimmer, which is it's like a surface line you can throw on a bass rod. This is the 150 size. I think they have the one he was using, the 115 size. That's basically just a cast and retrieve bait, and it runs down 2 or 3 feet. So it was a really good choice because it ran right over the top of that kelp and produced some bites, and this little video shows that.
I know it works. Oh, yeah. Oh, you got one, huh? Yep. There you go.
Jackpot so far.
There you go. Oh, fuck. That's a good one right here.
I guess you should have picked it up earlier, buddy.
Stay on, baby. There he is. That's a nice one.
Hold up the camera when it gets up.
on the AFTCO.
Nice. Good one.
Right?
Yeah. Hold up the camera.
First cast.
So we caught quite a few fish doing that, and eventually that area that we had conditions in kind of broke up. The conditions, current got a little stronger, stuff got pulled down more, the bait moved out. We really weren't seeing what we were seeing before anymore. So that's the situation now. Hey, we're just catching fish here. We pull up to do another drift through the same zone, and now there's no bites. Why? Well, the kelp's down another foot. Or maybe the kelp's up to the surface now, or whatever. But what was happening at that moment is no longer happening there. So instead of trying to beat that thing to death, what I'm gonna do is trying to recreate that moment somewhere else. And it was fairly late in the day. We launched at 2, and I don't know, we got home. I was back in the driveway by 7, so like 5, this is probably 5 o'clock. We're gonna start working our way back down. So now as I'm driving, I'm looking for that exact conditions again, the Goldilocks conditions, the word I'm trying to think of, where we were catching fish. And as we're driving along, I checked a few kelp beds, and I saw some kelp off of just above the MPA at Point Midseni. That it's a very short stretch of kelp because it abuts that MPA. It's about, the area's about 100 feet across, 150 feet. And as I pulled up, I knew immediately this looks exactly like what we saw in that other area. So stopped again and shot this little video.
Oh God, boiling right there.
I thought that was your cast.
No.
Wow, that was a good cast.
Oh God.
Woo! Ow! Whoa, look at all the bass.
Oh God.
Look at all the bass.
Jesus.
Oh my God. I mean,
Woo!
how perfect is that? 2 good casts. Oh, what a day.
What this all comes down to is situational awareness on the water. I'm going to talk a little bit about this regarding to offshore fishing as well here later, but every day is different. Every hour is different. Every 15 minutes can be different. Something can change. I've been to many places from Point Loma to Point Conception where I'm fishing calico bass, and the kelp is a certain way, and I'm catching fish or not catching fish, and I move away, and I can come back to that same spot a half an hour later, and something's different, and suddenly it's biting. So it's not ruling out water for the day; it's ruling out water for right now, and that's the thing. A lot of the, and I didn't get that in the beginning either. You know, I'd run all the way up to Rocky Point, not catch anything, and just drive down the coast, not catching anything, all the way back to the harbor. Now it's, I've been out there for 3 hours, haven't caught anything. I think the whole place is not biting. What you need to do is think about the conditions that you're seeing out there, make some determination, reference it back to past things. You know, when the current was going this direction, I've caught fish here. When the current's going that direction, I don't normally. So now if you go a mile or two away and you notice the current's changing, maybe reconsider going back to that spot you were at before. Anywhere you fish in the kelp, be it yellowtail, sea bass, calico bass, whatever, they all relate to it the same way. And it's important to pay attention to that stuff. But I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm going to move on. I want to say that my friend Civvy is selling his little whaler, and if you guys are looking for a great starter boat to fish the breakwall or fish calicos or halibut like him, he went out yesterday morning at 4 halibut, 30 pounds, just a few hours in the morning out of San Pedro there. Great little boat. So you can find him on Instagram at LBC_Civ, S-I-V, and that's a well taken care of boat, and he's a fishy guy, so if you're just want to get your first boat, looking for a little advice, I'm sure he can point you in the right direction. So let's talk about offshore fishing. You know, I heard today that San Diego got a couple of yellowfin. I heard some of the other 4-packs talking about seeing foamers that are both bluefin and yellowfin. I think that's great news, and that competition a lot of times, a lot of years, makes those bluefin bite better. It's much easier to pull up to an area where there's bluefin and yellowfin feeding on the same bait. I mean, one cast you get a yellowfin, next cast you get a bluefin situation sometimes. They're much more likely to bite a surface lure. That gets me pretty excited about heading out there once this weather lays down. But in the meantime, you know, if you want to go out and fish for these things, go on a 4-pack boat or a 6-pack boat where it's just you and your buddies and you're flying using a flying fish and a kite. It's like clockwork with these guys right now. If you really want to catch one, they're going out and very reliably catching these fish. I know Pinnacle's been whaling them on a daily basis. Billy Kay took my friend Larry Morris out the other day, and they were tight by like 8 in the morning. And there's a lot of boats out there that run great operations, so that's what you want to do. Save your money from sport boat. You know, I'd rather do one 12-hour trip on one of those boats than 5 overnight trips on a sport boat where you're going to be in the nausea tangle all night and having to sleep on a bunk pad somewhere. It's just gross. But anyway, it's not about that. Everybody loves fishing a different way. That's just not my style. But you know, those guys are really doing well on those 4-packs right now, and it's a much simpler process. They got guys to pick up your fish and process them, and everything else is a lot easier. But you know, last week I talked a little bit about behavior when fishing offshore and guys just chopping each other up and all this other stuff. And I wanted to add something that I've written about it in the past, but never really talked about it in the video. If you pull up into an area and there's some other boats fishing there, and if you're one of those guys that stays there because there's other boats there, you have to ask yourself, do these other boats know what the hell they're doing? Because I can guarantee you most of them don't. I mean, there's plenty of guys, myself at times too, have no idea what we're doing out there. We're just like, okay, here's good. And then a perfect example of this is, God, when was it? 5 or 6 years ago when those bluefin were biting, we had a marlin tournament going on. And the marlin, we're trolling for marlin in an area that's pretty close to where the bluefin are biting. So we're basically just trolling back and forth in the zone all day long. And at a distance, you can watch these boats that are fishing for bluefin, private boaters. So what happens is, let's say it's 10 o'clock in the morning, and there's a couple of boats that stop, and they catch some fish. And other boats see them and pull in as well, and they stop. Now, the guys that catch these fish are usually guys that know what they're doing, so once they've caught those fish, they're going to drive on and look for more fish to catch. But the boats that don't know what they're doing, they're going to troll back and forth with Mad Max, or maybe fly a kite, or fish, cast lures, or flatline bait in that same spot where the fish were caught. And then other boats who don't know what they're doing either come in and sit right next to those boats, not catch anything. So 2 hours after the fish were caught in that zone, you got 25 boats beating it to death, and the guys that caught those fish are 5 miles away catching them by themselves again. So if you see boats off fishing offshore, get your binoculars from a long distance. You don't need to drive right up there, and see what they're doing. Are they aimlessly driving around in circles? Are there birds? Are there fish up? If so, I would look for something else in that immediate area. If not, it's probably just the remnants of a gangbang that was happening there 3 hours ago. And you're much better off saying, okay, if there's a bunch of boats here, where am I? Okay, I'm on the edge of a ridge. Let me drive along that ridge. Let me look for some other, and you know, when you looked at your temp chart in the morning, was there a color break there? Was a temperature break there? Then drive along north or south is a reasonable thing, but away from those boats, not towards them. Because I tell you what, if you do happen to find some fish close to those boats, they're going to come over and do the same thing to you that they did to the guy that caught them before. So I basically, you know, we have gyro binoculars on the boat when we fish offshore. Jimmy's boat at Techno Stabbies on mine. So if we're seeing boats on the horizon a mile or two away, we're glassing them from that distance and using that as kind of like our buffer zone. So we want to keep like a mile away from anything else around us. So, you know, if you see some boats stop, try running a mile away from them in that same direction of whatever the structure is. So, you know, let's say I'm coming up the, you know, kind of the Clemente Ridge, or coming up the Clemente Ridge, and I see some boats on the distance, we'll glass them, see if they're fishing, and then aim for the ridge about a mile above or below them and start looking in that zone, because those fish are probably there as well. So if you don't find them there, you can kind of work your way towards them or away from them, but that gives you an indication of where to go. If you go to where the boats already are, you're going to have guys trolling Mad Max across your bow. You're going to have guys tangling up each other's flying fish. All this horrible stuff's going to happen. I know a lot of guys that are charter boat captains. I know a lot of guys that are really good offshore fishermen on private boats, and what none of them do is run towards the other boats. So just something to keep in mind. You know, it's going to be a windy weekend, so I didn't really have a lot else to talk about, but so I figured I'd share some advice on that. Anyway, if you're fishing, I hope you have good weather, and if not, I hope you have a great weekend.